Welcome to The Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris.
Today we're doing the song Festers. This is an episode where I probably never even realized the title until we sat down to do this podcast. I've always just thought about it as, hey, this is the one where we find out Gomer can sing, and he's amazing.
You know, if it were a Friends episode, that's what they would call it. You know, it's a weird title. You don't want to put Fester in anything. But I also feel like we sat through this episode before. What was the other choir one in season 2?
Barney and the choir. I mean,
it's the same thing.
Yeah, Barney's the only tenor in Mayberry, but I felt kind of like they had solved the problem of him not singing. But it doesn't. But I know the producer. I read this. The producer Aaron Rubin they knew they had an amazing talent with Jim Nabors, and they were kind of like, this is crazy, because when Andy Griffith saw him perform for the first time, he said, this man has an amazing singing voice and it sounds nothing like his speaking voice. And so they said, well, we're going to build this character and we're going to hold his singing until later. And maybe they just didn't. I'm kind of like, well, we're revisiting this because Barney can't sing, but you almost wonder if they could have just done an episode where they just discover his amazing singing voice. Did it have to really necessarily be juxtaposed with Barney?
Yeah, go to the fault of Barney. You know, a lot of that, the other thing I was thinking about is that sound mixing was so bad on Gomer's voice. It reminded me of, remember when Les Mis came out with Russell Crowe and Hugh Jackman and Anne Hathaway? And it was the first time that they've ever recorded people's voices live while they were performing. And so the music sounded really strange, but it was way more authentic. This was the exact opposite of that, where it's like Gomer's like fixing a tire, and in the back you got like, who's the operatic voice that's like coming out of the speakers here?
And it's almost mixed in such a way that you wouldn't have you would have said, oh, because you watched it the first time. And I was just kind of, when I was a kid, I watched this. I said, that really can't be Jim Nabors' real voice. And my mom's like, no, Jim Nabors is a very good singer. But I mean, the way it was almost seemed kind of like, well, he's just singing along and they've got another voice to dub it in.
Got it.
Don't you feel like it comes across that way if you 100%, don't know?
100%. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. That being said, this is a fine episode. We don't want to seem like it. I don't want to seem like I don't like it. We were just talking about some of the issues up front.
You speak for yourself. I didn't like this episode.
You didn't?
No, coming in negative today.
Pretty much how you start every day, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
All right. We open with this episode first aired on February 24th, 1964. We open with the choir singing Santa Lucia and Barney doing a terrible solo.
And we're going to hear Santa Lucia about every 4 seconds throughout this episode. I didn't actually think Barney did that bad. Like, he's overacting again, but it wasn't terrible.
I mean, I often feel kind of like, if you're gonna do a choir, there's a couple of things you can do. You can, if you notice, I don't know if you saw this, I was watching this, the guy who plays Glenn Cripes is in the back of the choir singing. And remember, Glenn Cripes is the one who saved the day in Barney and the choir with the singing. And you could have had him just do this again. It was one of these things where you're kind of like, I mean, John Masters is he's the choir director. He can kind of do whatever he wants. I mean, I don't know why they had to. I mean, if I was John Masters and Barney Fife was my only tenor solo, we would never do songs with tenor solos.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Just throwing it out there.
Garden stays on the shelf.
Yeah. But Barney's solo is not good. As John says, he went just a wee bit flat, and he also gives Sharon feedback. Sharon is actually portrayed by Andy Griffith's then wife, Barbara.
She wanted to get on because she was like, all right, you're going to have an affair with everybody else in the show. I might as well be on the show.
You really have come in negative today. Yeah. I mean, cha-ching. I mean, all right. So, yeah, that's just funny. And you may have a point. I'm not going to argue.
There was 100% a conversation. It's like, I can get you on the show if you want to be on the show. I didn't know you wanted to be on the show. Yeah, I'll get you on the show. It's fine.
Well, and I mean, basically everything they know, it was after a drunken yelling, screaming match is probably when it happened. Yeah. It wasn't like I don't get the impression Andy Griffith was one to take criticism from his wife very well.
Yeah.
But that being said, let's on a more positive note. John pulls Andy aside as they start to leave and says Barney is terrible, which he kind of is. But it turns out he may be the only tenor in town. And Andy warns if he switches Barney out at this point, that it would break his heart. All very true.
All true.
They go outside.
We call this like, you're already kind of half pregnant with this. Like once you've already cast Barney, you can't go back and uncast him. You just have to fix that for the future performance. This is a shicey move by the choir director because he clearly made a decision earlier that Barney would do this. You don't replace pre-performance.
It is. I agree with you. It's also one of those things where I don't mean to belittle any sort of the Mayberry choir, but the stakes here aren't that high.
No, they're not. And everybody knows you go up there, it's like watching, not a fair comparison, but a child's Christmas pageant. They're not going to be great, but you know the kid and you're just happy they're up there. These people are happy that they have a hometown choir, and good for Barney for getting up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you're right. It's like, Christmas pageants, you know what you're dealing with. I mean, I sometimes feel, I won't say this about everything. I mean, there are community theater groups that do amazing plays and do very good work. But sometimes when you go see a choir performance or you go see one, you're sometimes just going because to support the community and to support the town.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like paying taxes.
So they go outside. Barney, I think he thinks he's on some sort of rocket trajectory to fame. He says he insists that he's Sonic. And he goes to his singing lessons with Miss Poultice, and they talk about Leonard Blush, which was one of her prized pupils, I suppose. This is really funny. Barney does his voice exercises, and that's also hilarious. She says he's doing a great job, but he conflates it. She's actually played by Rita Shaw, who played. You remember the older convict on Convicts at Large?
Yeah,
that's her.
Oh, really? I think she's the most fascinating character in this episode. She does think Barney has a good voice. And usually voice teachers are pretty brutal in their feedback. That makes me think if she's pulling one over on people, maybe she's losing her hearing. I don't know, but there's a backstory here that it is fascinating that is connected to Convicts at Large as well.
Maybe she's the type of, her work is not necessarily making you a better singer, where maybe her work is getting the most out of you. Because there's some coaches they talk about in coaching. There's some coaches that are really good with X's and O's, and some coaches that can just make you want to run, can get you motivated, and she's the type that will make you run through a brick wall for them.
Yep.
So he tells Andy that Miss Poultice says he's amazing. He warns Andy that show business may strike him any day. Andy basically tells him, don't get too big for your britches. If John Masters finds another tenor, he may let him sing the solo, which is foreshadowing. And I agree with you now thinking about this. Either take the solo away from him or don't. Don't say if some dude walks in off the street, I'm going to replace you.
Yeah.
So they go to the church, and Gomer is replacing a tire for John. Later, the choir is practicing and singing Santa Lucia. Gomer sings along outside and is amazing. It is kind of almost a little funny that they all stop what they're doing and run over to see this.
Yeah, they're aghast. There's so much talent in Mayberry today.
So much talent. You need to adjust your attitude right now. I'm just saying.
He really did have a nice voice.
He did really have a nice voice. He did. John loves his voice, obviously. Barney is very insecure and says the voice is crude, but he's fine with Gomer being in the choir. John tells Andy to get Gomer. Obviously, he's got a beautiful voice. And when Gomer leaves, John says he's the soloist, and he asks Andy to tell Barney. He's reluctant to do it as we go to commercial. And after the break, Andy comes into the jail, and Barney is doing his vocal exercises. And he tells Barney he needs to speak with him. And it turns, Andy has to break it to him that someone else will sing the solo. And this is also, I'm not John Masters, not on my cool list.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you're making responsibility.
Yeah.
This feels like one of the early episodes when the mayor would just like tell Andy that he had to do something. And it was like, is that really part of the job description?
Yeah. No. He shouldn't have to do this. It's ridiculous.
Competence.
Yeah. So Barney's dejected, and even more so when he learns it's going to be Gomer. And we go to Gomer practicing with John, and it turns out he is getting pretty nervous. Gomer is. And they make a time for them to practice the next day. And Gomer and John and the pianist leave. Did they see Barney just sitting over there in the dark in the back of the room?
I think so.
You think they just don't care?
They don't care. I mean, think about how Masters has treated this whole thing, right? He doesn't care. He is dead set on getting the best performance out, and so he doesn't care about who he has to break along the way.
You don't think Gomer's like, hey, Barney, what are you sitting back there for?
Gomer is too concerned with his nerves that he's in a K-hole.
Okay. Well, needless to say, Barney gets up, he walks over, he picks us up the music that Gomer left behind. And when Gomer runs back to get it, he sees Barney singing, and it's very sad. And Gomer's got a good heart. Later that night, the next day, they are getting ready for the show, and they can't find Gomer, who later comes in and says he has a bad voice. And John says he has no choice at this point of who to put in there. And Gomer suggests Barney. John doesn't want to do it. And Andy,
a little moment of character here. This is where we see a lot of character of Gomer and John.
Yeah. And it didn't really even feel like John acquiesced. It was like Andy's like, oh, we're getting Barney. We'll be back.
Yeah. But I do believe with his tail between his legs.
Yeah. And so basically Andy and Gomer go to get Barney, who refuses, saying, I'm not a plaything that you can just play with and toss to one side. I've got some pride. And then Miss Poultice gives him a good kick in the rear, and Barney agrees to do it to the sound of the cavalry music. And at the hall, they are about to sing, and Gomer basically yells good luck to Barney, and they realize he has been faking it. And then John gave him into the choir, and Barney snips at him, and as the show starts.
Classic.
And they sing, and this is where I mentioned, you can see Glenn Cripes in the background, and I'm kind of like, man, Glenn Cripes.
He's just not having it.
Glenn Cripes is like, I'm not a plaything that you can play with and toss to one side.
Yeah, correct. He's like, I'm going to learn to be a baritone.
Yeah. And it comes time for the solo, and Barney and Gomer both refuse to go up, and the choir holds the note for 26 seconds.
It's like Happy Birthday, and then when you blow out the candle, or that second Happy Birthday song.
Yeah.
Forever until it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever experienced that.
You must not have been a child of Montessori. We had 3 Happy Birthday songs.
Yeah, I was never in Montessori. I went to a school that had a Montessori, but I was already too old for Montessori.
Yeah.
So Andy pushes the two of them up, and they sing the solo as a trio, and we go to commercial. And in the epilogue,
which is nice. I liked this.
I did too.
Andy comes together. Andy still gets to be the good guy.
Yeah. And they sounded good.
They did.
Yeah. In the epilogue, Miss Poultice says the 3 of them should become a trio, and she offers some names. One of them is the Aristocrats, and I was thinking of that.
That made me laugh.
It made me laugh too. I was thinking of that. Obviously, it's always that riff on the filthy joke.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was thinking about this, folks. This is not the moment where the loaded goat goes blue. But the guy goes, like, the joke starts off. Guy goes in to pitch an act, and they say, the act starts, and it basically is a choir singing a note for 26 seconds while people argue over who the solo is. And then finally 3 guys walk to the mic and sing it. And they're like, well, what do you call this act? He's like, the Aristocrats.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
So they walk away, and Andy just says show business is full of ups and downs, and they laugh.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You like that line? I feel like it's weak.
I felt like it was a weak close. I felt like this episode, the tent pole of the episode is we got to basically show our audience that Gomer Pyle can sing. It
would have been I agree. It would have been more fun though if Gomer went into Nashville and tried to get on America's Got Talent or The Voice, and then goes through that way, you know?
Well, I hate to break this to you. Those shows weren't on back in.
It's not a bad sketch, though.
Not a bad sketch. Yeah. The thing about it is Jim Nabors he sang he was a professional singer, did shows for the rest pretty much until he retired.
He was like the first Susan Boyle.
I don't think he was like Susan Boyle. Jim Nabors could do a lot. Jim Nabors was like in his 20s when he did this. It was Jim Nabors could be funny. And then they said, wow, Jim Nabors can sing. And we should capitalize on that.
You've got your story. I've got mine.
I think one of the things that I feel about this episode is it's a little bit of a retread. It's a little uneven, and I don't think some of the moments really pay off.
Yeah, I agree. There's no cathartic release. I'm going to go straight into stars here. Like, it is a fine episode to watch, but we've seen it, we've done it. You get Gomer's voice, which is a plus, but you don't really believe that it's his voice. And so you're kind of like, unless you know that, you're like, meh. So I'd give it like a 6 just because it's very watchable. No complaints. It didn't make me laugh, didn't make me cry. I got nothing.
I feel like it's a 6 too. And like you said, it's the thing of it is this is an episode where I didn't even know the title of it until we sat down and to break it down.
Yeah. Learning something new every day. Eric.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts?
No, sir. Do you want to sing for us?
No.
Sing us off?
Let me tell you something. I don't know what kind of people Barney grew up around who basically told him he could sing. But I was learned at a very young age that I am not a good singer. And nobody worried about my feelings on that front. Yeah. So, well, thanks for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe. Next week, we'll do the Shoplifters. Until then, Christopher, I'm not a plaything that you can just play with and toss to one side. Got some pride.
Toy Lucica.